The laughter hadn't even died down when I left. The waiter was mid-pour, and the wine was spilling over the rim of someone's glass as I slid my chair back and stood up. Dahlia didn't notice. Not at first. Her hand was still on Brandon's shoulder. Her voice still ringing from the punchline she'd just delivered. I think she said something like, "Imagine dedicating your life to something no one actually needs." More laughter. I didn't say a word. I didn't slam the chair. I didn't demand silence. I just turned around and left, quietly, politely, like someone excusing himself to the bathroom. The elevator took 12 seconds to arrive. I counted. 12 seconds where my reflection in the chrome doors stared back at me like a stranger. Collar uneven. A tiny thread sticking out from my left cuff. I'd worn my best shirt. Ironed it twice. Polished my shoes even though no one at that party looked down long enough to notice. When the elevator dinged, I stepped inside. When the doors closed, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even breathe. But in my head, I replayed it. The joke. Her smirk. Brandon's obnoxious chuckle. The way her colleagues tilted their heads back and slapped the table like they'd just heard the cleverest thing in the world. They were laughing at me. And she let them. No, worse. She led them. 37 minutes earlier, she had called me the most supportive partner ever, while clinking champagne glasses with her boss. 37 minutes. That's how fast loyalty expired. She never thought I'd walk out. She underestimated me. Everyone always does. I expected her to follow me. I expected heels clacking down the hall. Maybe even an apologetic, "Wait, Elle, I didn't mean it like that," or some panicked, half-whispered excuse about how it was just office humor, just a joke, just her way of fitting in with people who wouldn't otherwise take her seriously. But she didn't. Not during the elevator ride. Not in the lobby. Not even when I stepped out into the frigid night air and realized I'd left my coat on the back of her chair. I stood outside the building, watching my breath form little clouds in the December air. Inside, through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the rooftop, the party pulsed on. Music, lights, laughter. Dahlia was still up there somewhere, probably explaining my sudden disappearance as one of his moody spells. That's what she called them lately. Spells. As if I were cursed. As if I just needed to snap out of it. She never said it when we were alone. Only in front of others. That's when the words changed. That's when I became her quirky project, instead of her partner. I walked. No destination. No coat. No music in my ears. Just the sound of New York breathing around me. Sirens, strangers' voices, the occasional cab splashing through a puddle. I didn't want to think about what just happened, so I focused on little things. A loose shoelace. A crooked parking sign. The sound of my own heartbeat, which felt far too fast for someone who hadn't moved much all night. By the time I checked my phone, it had been 49 minutes. Then it buzzed. "Dahlia, can we talk?" That was it. No question mark. No, I'm sorry. No asking where I was or if I was okay. Just those 3 words. Corporate and empty, like she was emailing a client after a bad pitch. I didn't respond. Not because I was trying to be dramatic. Not because I was angry. I didn't respond because something in me had finally snapped into clarity. And once that kind of truth arrives, it doesn't whisper. It screams. Because I remembered something. 2 months ago, I'd invited Dahlia to a small community event I helped organize, a piano recital for kids whose families couldn't afford private lessons. I worked with those kids every week, watched them struggle through notes and nerves and self-doubt. It was messy, imperfect, beautiful. She didn't show. Said she had a last-minute strategy session with her team. But that night, one of the interns from her company accidentally tagged her in an Instagram story. She wasn't in the office. She was at a wine bar. With Brandon. The same Brandon who laughed loudest tonight. The same Brandon who looked at me earlier like I was a character from a 90s sitcom. Fun to mock. Easy to forget. I don't think she cheated on me. That's not what this is about. It's worse. She pitted me. She used me. She dressed me up in irony and took me to parties like I was some kind of retro accessory that made her seem more grounded to the people above her. That realization didn't burn. It froze. Like the moment you realized the painting you admired for years was actually printed on cheap paper. And still, part of me wanted to go back, apologize, say I overreacted, wrap my freezing hands around a wine glass, and pretend none of it happened. Because I'm Elwood. The fixer. The quiet one. The man who waits. The man who forgives. But tonight, I walked past the subway entrance. And kept walking. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't always scream. Sometimes, it smells like her shampoo. Sometimes, it looks like a sticky note with a smiley face she leaves on your lunch. Sometimes, it's so carefully hidden behind, "I'm proud of you," that you don't even see the knife until after it's already in. I ended up back at my workshop. Not home. There didn't feel like mine anymore. The lights were off. The air inside was colder than outside, and the whole place smelled like varnish and old wood. My tools were still laid out from the last clock I'd repaired, an 1890s pendulum I'd been restoring for a widow who never came to pick it up. I remember her saying, "It's too quiet in my house now." I understood that in a way I didn't back then. I sat down on the stool and stared at nothing. My phone buzzed again. "Dahlia, you seriously walked out over a joke?" Another buzz. "Dahlia, I told them you were just being sensitive. You always do this." And finally, "Dahlia, please don't make a scene. We're both adults." There it was. That word. Scene. As if standing up when someone devalues your entire life was a performance. As if I was somehow embarrassing her by not being numb. But it wasn't the messages that got to me. It was the smell. I leaned back and caught a faint citrus scent in the air. Her scent. Dahlia used to stop by the workshop sometimes with lemon tea and overpriced pastries she claimed were just around the corner. She always left a bit of herself behind. Fingerprints on glass, hairpins on the windowsill, and that smell. Light, expensive, sharp. I used to find it comforting. Now it was suffocating. I stood up and walked toward the back room. That's when I saw it, her scarf, folded neatly on my chair. She hadn't been in here for over a week, but the scarf was fresh. The crease still sharp. She must have stopped by the day before. Why? Curious, I checked the shelf where I kept my register book, the one where I logged every repair, every invoice, every custom request. It was slightly ajar. That book was private. Not locked, but private. I had names in there. Addresses. Even notes about some clients who wanted anonymity for personal reasons. Celebrities. Widows. Recluses. And one name stood out, underlined twice. Brandon Thatcher. Clock. Swiss regulator, broken pendulum. Drop-off date, TBD. Requested full restoration. Said it's a gift. I hadn't remembered writing that. And I certainly hadn't spoken to Brandon. I opened my laptop. Checked my emails. Nothing. Checked my physical inbox under the desk. No request forms. Which meant, she wrote it. Dahlia. But why? I stared at the name like it was written in another language. What would she be doing, scheduling a restoration job in his name? And calling it a gift? For who? A sick feeling crept in. That cold, metallic taste of your gut tightening before your brain catches up. I looked at the note again. Gift. Had she been using me to prepare a gift for him? My stomach turned. I sat back down. Because that meant she wasn't just mocking me last night. She'd been using my time, my hands, my craft, to impress another man. And I, Elwood, the idiot with calloused fingers and too many clocks, had been helping her do it. I didn't cry, but something inside me shifted. Not like a break, more like a click, like a gear finally falling into place. Sleep never came. The more I tried to close my eyes, the louder everything became inside my head. Dahlia's laughter, Brandon's smug chuckle, the clink of crystal glasses against empty validation. I sat in that workshop until the sky bled into gray, and the shadows shifted across the walls like they were judging me for staying so still. Something was wrong. Not just emotionally wrong, physically off. I could feel it. The way a craftsman knows when a cog is slightly out of place, when a spring is wound a quarter turn too tight. I stood up and walked toward the cabinet where I kept my most valuable pieces. Not the ones for sale, the ones I considered too meaningful to part with. Each clock had a name, a story, a soul. But one was missing. A 1926 Morbier wall clock. Deep mahogany casing. A brass face that shimmered even in the dark, and an intricate double chime that was tuned so precisely I refused to let anyone else touch it. I never sold it. Never displayed it. It was my late grandfather's. My inheritance. My compass. And it was gone. My pulse hit my ears. I opened every drawer, every shelf, every toolkit. Nothing. I ran to the back storage room. Tore through the blanket-covered pieces I hadn't restored yet. Empty. Gone. Vanished. The last time I remembered seeing it was a week ago, after Dahlia stopped by with a new lipstick and a forced smile. She said she had 10 minutes, needed to charge her phone, and sat quietly while I rewound the Morbier and told her again, for the third time, that I'd never sell it. Some things, I said, are built to stay in one place. And she'd nodded, barely listening. She was scrolling her phone, texting someone. Probably him. I paced the floor. Who would have taken it? No break-in. No forced entry. No cameras, because I never needed them. This place had always been sacred. Untouched. Unless. I opened my laptop again. Searched through my sent emails, drafts, anything that could give me a clue. And there it was, a draft email saved under an address I didn't recognize. @Thatcherbrass.com. The subject line was empty, but the body read, one of a kind. Antique. Fully restored. He won't suspect a thing. It wasn't in my writing style. The punctuation was too neat. No typos. I never capitalized every first letter in a subject line. But Dahlia did. Always. It hit me like a cold slap. She took my grandfather's clock. The one thing I never let anyone touch. And she was going to gift it to Brandon. Or maybe she already had. I stood frozen for what felt like a full minute, the draft still glowing on the screen. That clock was the only thing I had left from the man who taught me everything. How to fix, how to listen, how to be still in a world that demands constant motion. And now it was gone, stolen, repackaged as a corporate offering to a man who probably didn't know the difference between a Morbier and a microwave. This wasn't a breakup anymore. This wasn't a failed relationship. This was desecration. And the worst part? She knew exactly what it meant to me. She knew. And she took it anyway. That's when I decided I wasn't going to text her. I wasn't going to yell. I was going to show up. Not for revenge. Not for closure. For the clock. For the truth. For myself. Whoever that even was now. I didn't plan what I was going to say. I didn't shower. Didn't change clothes. Just threw on my jacket, locked up the shop, and walked to her apartment like a man possessed. I could have taken the subway, sure, but walking gave me time to process, or maybe postpone, the weight of what I was about to do. Dahlia and I didn't live together, technically, but we might as well have. I still had a key. She insisted I keep it after the second time she lost hers and had to call a locksmith at midnight. I never gave it back. Not out of attachment, but because I always assumed I'd need it for emergencies. This counted. The doorman wasn't there, good. Her building had one of those weird rotating shifts during the week, so I slipped in unnoticed, past the elevator where we'd once kissed on New Year's, and into the hall that smelled like industrial cleaner and fake lavender. I unlocked the door and stepped into her apartment. It was quiet. Dim. Cold, even. Like the heat hadn't been on. I half expected to hear music from her smart speaker or see a half-eaten yogurt on the counter. But there was nothing. Something felt wrong. I moved through the living room slowly, my eyes scanning for the clock. It wasn't on the mantel. Not on the table. Not on the shelf with the curated stack of untouched books she'd bought just for aesthetic. I started toward the bedroom. That's when I noticed the closet. It was open. And empty. Not completely, but empty in the ways that mattered. The row of designer heels she kept perfectly aligned. Gone. The garment bags with color-coded labels. Gone. The drawer that used to overflow with makeup samples she got from PR events. Empty. I opened the bathroom cabinet. Half her skincare was gone. Her toothbrush, gone. Perfume bottles? The expensive ones? Gone. My heart dropped. She'd moved out. Without telling me. While we were still engaged. I looked around again and realized how many little things had vanished. The throw blanket I gave her when she caught the flu. The Polaroid of us in front of the clock tower in Maine. The mug I made her at that terrible pottery class. All gone. She wasn't just preparing for the wedding. She'd been preparing to leave. I backed into the kitchen and leaned against the counter, trying to breathe. I felt lightheaded, like the floor was shifting under me. That's when the front door opened. I didn't have time to think. Just turned around, expecting to see her. It wasn't Dahlia. It was her sister, Lynette. She froze in the doorway, holding a small box and a keycard, clearly not expecting anyone to be there. Her expression dropped the second she saw me. "Elwood," she said, stepping inside cautiously. "What are you doing here?" I stared at her like she was a hologram. "What do you mean, what am I doing here?" She never told me she was moving out. Lynette glanced down, avoided eye contact. She said she'd explain. Eventually. Eventually? I laughed. It came out too loud. Too cracked. We were supposed to get married in 6 weeks. I was picking venues. I was fixing her mother's music box for the reception. And she just, what? Moves out like it's a breakup on mute? Lynette sighed and placed the box down on the table like it was radioactive. She didn't know how to tell you. She didn't try. Silence. Then I asked the question I didn't want the answer to. Is she with Brandon? Lynette looked up, eyes wide, and for a second, she hesitated. Then she said, not anymore. My stomach sank. That word, anymore, which meant yes. Which meant I'd been walking around with a ring in my pocket while she'd been rotating lovers like seasonal handbags. I should have left then. I should have thrown the key on the counter and walked out like a man with dignity. But I asked one more question. Do you know where my grandfather's clock is? Lynette blinked. What clock? I described it. Every detail, every gear, every scratch on the casing. She didn't recognize it. But then she said something I hadn't expected. She shipped something heavy 2 days ago. I helped her carry it to the delivery guy. Big wooden box. It looked old. I thought it was furniture. Did she say where it was going? Lynette hesitated, but my stare pressed her. She reached into her bag, pulled out her phone, scrolled through her messages, and held it up. A shipping label. Thatcher & Co. ATTN, Brandon Thatcher. 190 West Weatherby, Suite 12B. And just like that, everything fell into place. She stole the most personal thing I owned. Packaged it with a lie. Sent it to a man who laughed while she humiliated me. And then left without a word. I took a long breath, walked to the door, and said to Lynette in the calmest voice I could muster, tell her I'm coming for it. I didn't mean revenge. I meant restoration. Of the clock. Of my dignity. Of time itself. It was pouring by the time I reached the building. Not just a soft drizzle, either. That kind of sudden, vindictive rain that soaks through your collar and socks before you even realize you forgot an umbrella. I didn't turn back. I didn't pause. I didn't care. I walked into that marble lobby like I belonged there. Like my soaked boots didn't squeak with every step, like I hadn't just learned my entire relationship was a curated lie. Thatcher & Company was on the 12th floor. I didn't bother drying off. I walked straight past the empty leather lounge and approached the front desk. The receptionist looked up from her screen, her smile already halfway formed. You must be Elwood. I froze. She smiled wider, like she'd been waiting for this moment. Brandon's expecting you. Expecting me. My brain stalled. Had Dahlia told him? Was this some kind of setup? Why would Brandon, the man whose voice still echoed in my skull from that night's humiliation, expect me? I followed her silent gesture toward the glass door behind the desk. It clicked open with a soft buzz. I stepped inside. The air was too clean, too quiet. It smelled like artificial citrus and wealth. Long white hallways. Modern art that looked like chaos and cost more than my annual income. Brandon's office was at the far end. I knew it before I saw the plaque. Some people radiate smugness so loud it leaks through walls. I pushed open the door. He was standing by the window, wearing a slate gray suit, staring out over the skyline like a villain at the midpoint of a Netflix thriller. He turned slowly, his face unreadable. Not smug, not surprised, almost calm. Elwood, he said, like we were old friends. Glad you came. Want a drink? I didn't answer. He gestured to the leather chair across from his desk. Sit, please. You're not here for a fight. Dahlia made that very clear. I ignored the chair. Where's my clock? Brandon didn't flinch. He walked around to his desk, opened a side drawer, and pulled out a thin manila folder. Tossed it onto the glass surface. I didn't know it was yours. I stepped closer. You don't know anything about clocks. No, he admitted. But I know Dahlia. She said it was a wedding gift. A family heirloom from her side. She made a whole story. Said it reminded her of her grandfather's summer cabin in Vermont. Even showed me a photo. It was yours, wasn't it? I nodded slowly. She lied to both of us. He said it so casually, so cleanly, like he'd already processed it, filed it away, moved on. That's when I saw it. Not guilt, not arrogance, but exhaustion. The man looked defeated. I ended it, he said. With her. I didn't speak. Brandon opened the folder, slid a photo across the desk. A grainy black and white shot of the clock, sitting boxed in a storage facility with a barcode tag on top. I didn't even bring it home. Something about it felt off. She was too eager, too polished. When she gave it to me, she said, now you'll always be on time. I laughed. She laughed. But later that night, she said it again, and this time, she wasn't joking. What does that mean? I asked. He leaned forward. It wasn't a gift, Elwood. It was a message. I swallowed hard. Brandon tapped the folder. She told me everything about your shop, your hours, How quiet it is. How you don't lock your tools. I thought she was just venting. But now I think she was planning something. A chill ran through me. She asked if we had a soundproof room in this building, he added. Said it was for a project pitch. That she needed a place with no distractions. I said sure, gave her access. Then I checked the logs. He turned his monitor around, pulled up a time-stamped security feed. There she was, Dahlia, entering the building at 3:17 a.m. 2 nights ago, carrying something. Not the clock, a bag. A small red duffel with gold zippers. She wasn't alone. A man was with her. Not me. Not Brandon. I leaned closer. I couldn't see his face, but I recognized the posture. The walk. It was the building's doorman. You think she's? I trailed off. I don't know, Brandon said, but I think she's done this before. Played people off each other. You're not the first one. And I wasn't either. The air felt heavier now. My clock. My shop. My memories. They weren't just violated. They were weaponized. Where is it? I asked again, voice like gravel. Brandon slid over a small card. Storage unit address. My name on the label. I had it transferred this morning. I didn't want it here anymore. I took the card, turned toward the door. Elwood, he said before I left, I think you're lucky. You saw it before it was too late. I didn't answer, because I wasn't sure he was right. I hadn't seen it. Not even close. The storage facility was in a part of the city I hadn't visited in years. The kind of industrial strip just far enough from downtown that the skyline disappears behind brick and barbed wire. Rows of metal roll-up doors lined both sides of a gravel lot, each one stamped with peeling red numbers like some forgotten military outpost. The air smelled like rain and rust. Unit 44B. That was the one Brandon had marked on the card. I showed my ID, signed a release, and a bored-looking clerk handed me the key. I didn't rush. I should have. But something about the moment felt too heavy for speed. Like opening that door would also open something I wasn't ready to name. The padlock clicked open. The door screeched as I lifted it. And there it was. Crated. Wrapped in thick, off-white canvas. My grandfather's morbier. Sitting exactly as it had in my shop. Upright, proud, delicate despite its weight. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me, sealing the space in silence. I crouched down and slowly unwrapped the canvas, revealing the familiar wood grain, the burnished brass, the slight crack in the left foot I never repaired out of respect. My fingers shook, not from rage this time. Something else. Something colder. I ran my hand along the side of the casing. That's when I noticed it. 4 screws missing from the back panel. Not loose. Gone. I froze. I had never, not once, removed that panel. That compartment wasn't part of the restoration. It was decorative, sealed decades ago. But now it had a sliver of space between the wood and the frame. Someone had opened it. Recently. I turned the clock around and slowly pulled the panel off. And inside, buried behind layers of hollow space, was a cloth pouch. Red. Drawstring. Soft. New. I didn't touch it right away. Just stared. My breath fogged the inside of the glass casing as I leaned closer. My own reflection stared back, eyes wide and rimmed in disbelief. Hands trembling. Then I reached in and pulled the pouch out. It was heavier than I expected. I loosened the string. Inside were documents. Folded, aged at the edges, but real. Birth certificates. Medical records. A death certificate. All unfamiliar names. Some matched. Others didn't. I sat down on the concrete floor, legs crossed like a child in school, and started sorting through them one by one. The names on the birth certificates were all female. Different last names. Different years. All born within the last 15 years. One name came up twice. Dahlia Whitmore. Same birth date. 2 different parents. 2 different cities. 2 different states. My mouth went dry. I kept going. A lease agreement under the name Evelyn Marchette. A bank statement for Charlotte Danes. A fake passport. A burner phone number. And finally, a handwritten note. No salutation. No date. Just this. If you're reading this, it means you looked too close. You were never supposed to. You were supposed to be boring. Soft. Predictable. But here you are, prying open things that don't belong to you. Congratulations. Now you know. But you still don't understand. I read it twice. 3 times. Each time it hit harder. This wasn't just betrayal. This wasn't just emotional cruelty. This was fabrication. Constructed identity. Lies so deep-rooted they didn't have edges anymore. She hadn't just played me. She wasn't real. And suddenly, memories started warping. Conversations we had that didn't add up. Moments where she changed details about her family. Her father died of cancer. No, stroke. Wait, didn't she say he was still alive in Maine? I used to chalk it up to stress. Or maybe my bad memory. But now I knew. She wasn't confused. She was covering. This wasn't some tangled love triangle. It was a performance. And I was just one scene. I packed everything back into the pouch, resealed the clock, and sat in the darkness of the storage unit, heart pounding. I wasn't angry anymore. I was terrified. Terrified of who she was. Of how close I had let her get. Of what would have happened if I hadn't walked out of that rooftop party. And yet, I still missed her. That's the worst part. Some part of me, small and stupid and loyal to a ghost, still wanted to believe that some version of her had loved me. But love doesn't require aliases. Love doesn't need storage units and secret compartments and notes written like threats. I stood up, closed the crate, locked it tight. Then I pulled out my phone. No missed calls, but one message. From an unknown number. You're going to regret this, Elwood. You should have stayed in your lane. No name. No sign-off. Just that. And a location pin. She was waiting for me. The location pin led to a cafe on the edge of the city. Not the polished kind with marble countertops and minimalist furniture. This place was old. Mismatched chairs, faded checkered floors, yellowed menus laminated so long ago the corners curled. It was the kind of place people didn't stumble into. You had to know it was there. She was sitting by the window. Alone. No disguise. No wig. No man on her arm. Just Dahlia. Or whoever she really was. She looked up as I walked in. No shock. No smirk. Just a small, tired smile. The kind people give at funerals, when the grief's already dried and all that's left is memory. I sat down across from her. No hug. No handshake. No preamble. Who are you? She didn't flinch. She didn't pretend not to understand. I don't have a real answer for that, she said. Not one you'd believe. I placed the red pouch on the table. She didn't reach for it. I found everything. I know, she said. I wanted you to. That made me pause. What? She leaned forward, eyes clearer than I'd ever seen them. You were the only person who didn't want anything from me. You didn't try to fix me, or use me, or compete with me. You just existed. Softly. Kindly. And I knew it couldn't last. Not with who I am. I shook my head slowly. Then why take the clock? Why lie about the gift? Why humiliate me? She winced. Because I was scared. And when people like me get scared, we sabotage the only good thing in the room. I didn't say anything. Let the silence settle. Then she added, I never meant to fall in love with you. It didn't feel like a compliment. It felt like an apology. Is Dahlia even your name? She smiled faintly. It's the one I gave you. That counts for something, right? I wanted to be angry. I really did. But all I felt was exhaustion. Like I'd been running a race I never agreed to. And this cafe, this moment, was finally the finish line. She slid an envelope across the table. There's money in here. Enough to make up for the clock. And the piano lessons. And the grief. I didn't touch it. I don't want anything from you, I said. She nodded. That's why I had to give it. We sat there for a while. No more lies. No more revelations. Just two people who once believed in something soft and strange and temporary. When I finally stood up to leave, she didn't stop me. Elwood, she said just before I reached the door. You were the only real thing I ever had. I turned around. I still am, I said. You just weren't ready for real. I stepped into the sunlight. The rain had stopped. The street smelled like wet pavement and new air. And for the first time in what felt like years, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel broken. I felt whole. Not because she apologized. Not because I got answers. But because I made it through. That night, I went back to my workshop. Rehung the clock on the wall. It ticked like it always had. But this time, it didn't feel like it was measuring loss. It felt like it was keeping time for something new. Something mine.